Okay, so today I'm gonna go ahead and work out of chapter 4 of our Access textbook here, and the subject we're gonna cover today is forms. All right, so this begins on page 850, and we'll go over the first two. The way chapter 4 is organized, the first half of it we look at form basics, and then the second half of it here and creating forms, and then the second half of it here. We deal with reports. So both forms and reports I would classify in the area of user interface. Okay, so with a lot of databases, you just have the database, which we've looked at, which consists of tables and queries, and then we have relationships between the tables and the whole relational model. Access has another component here, and that's the user interface component. So I think of forms as something a person would use to enter data and to view data on a monitor or a computer system or a handheld device, versus reports. Forms are dynamic. They can change. We can push information out. We can pull information out. Reports are static. So when we run a report, we end up with a static. And I think of a report as something we'd print off our printer, but we'll also kind of move that into a more electronic version. So I'm thinking like a PDF would be an example of a report. And reports we can publish as tables, lots of different things we can do with them. Okay, so I have an example database here, and if a person really doesn't know, we can look over here and really doesn't know what this database consists of. I have two tables here which I can clearly delineate, but I'm going to encourage you to use a database tool that I think we should all be familiar with right now. If I click on that, and I can pull up my relationships, okay, and in my relationships here I can actually get a very good understanding or derive an understanding of what this database consists of. So I have two tables here. I have an employees table and I have a title table, and the title table and the employees table, or the title field in the employees table, is actually a foreign key, and it's a foreign key again because it's a primary key over here. All right, so I could see here this is useful and helpful. I encourage you to take advantage of this tool and Access, because I can identify all the fields. So here we're collecting information on employees. What fields do we collect information? Well, we have a primary key here, uniquely identifies each employee: last name, first name, address, zip code, phone, title, hire date, etc. Okay. And then we have probably some preset titles that are in this lookup table over here. All right, let me close that now. And whoops. Yeah, I don't need to save my changes there. And so let me pull up my employee table. And here's my data. And remember, I have a data sheet view and I have a design view with this. All right, let me close this, and I'm going to create a new tool over here. We got tables, we got queries, which we've covered. Let's look at forms. And I have right now selected the employee table, and I'm just going to use this create a form tool, and then boom, just drops it down there. Now, form, I might think of another way of describing this user interface, and maybe an old technology called index cards. At one time we used to keep index cards, or we even still do it today, where we have we might get a business card. We pass those around. That contains my contact information. I'm going to use my tab key. If you notice here, I can tab through each of these different controls, and then down at the bottom here, I can move from one record to the next. You see right here in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, I can flip to record 2, record 3, record 4. I can go to the very first record or the very last record. I also have a opportunity here to start a new record, so I can add a new record here. All right, and I have a search tool. Okay, so this is a nice user interface for people to enter data and view data. All right, and my employees, by the way, are old rock stars, right, from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Okay, so let's add a new record. Okay. And my last name, let's enter for this particular individual. By the way, I'm still in design view here too. Let me hit my views here, and I have if we look at these, I have my design view, like I have my design view in a table, and I have my datasheet view, or I call it here my form view. All right. In fact, I'm going to save this too. Let me save this particular form, and I'm going to call this form 1. All right. And I'll close it off here, and we'll open and close it before I start entering data. Okay, so here's my form. I open up my form. Allows me to tab through my different fields, and I'll do that, and I want to go to create a new record here. All right, and so my last name here, we'll put in Bon Jovi. First name John. Address, give him an address here. Whoops. Put him on 2nd Street. And he's Missoula zip code. And by the way, I put a little formatting in my table here, so it does look like a phone number. And I have my designated titles here. We'll make, he's the new person here, we'll just make him an assistant. And then we'll come up with a date, a hiring date here. And I get these nice little controls here, so we'll make today his hiring day. And so we've created a new record. Now, let me close that off. Forms are user interfaces for tables. So if I open up my table here, we can see my new record down here, record number ID 5 has been entered in here. Okay, so they're not, so a form is just a way of pushing information into a table. And you can think of forms, we use forms all the time. This is not your first experience with forms. I'm sure all of you have been out on the internet and have purchased something. Maybe you're out shopping around for airline tickets or a rental car or motel, or you're purchasing, I don't know, a new a book from the bookstore using their e-commerce site. And so what you're doing is you're populating using a form. And so we see web forms all the time that we utilize. If you're registering for classes, there's forms for that, and you're pushing and pulling things out of database tables when you do that. And so it's no different here, but we use in Microsoft Access, the different, I guess the one difference is that your form is part of the database. Okay, so Microsoft Access as a desktop database has forms which push information into tables. All right, let me do this now. Let's create another form. And I'm going to go over here, and I'll just show you another example. I have lots of different form types, okay? And one of the, as you go through chapter 4 here, I'll point you to a page. If you look at 852 and 853, figures 4.3 and 4.4, you can see a split form table, and I'll show you how to create one of those. And in my split form table, I have my form here, but then I also have, down at the bottom here, I have a view of my table, okay? So let me go to my datasheet view with this, and I'm going to save this form right away, and I'll call this one Form 2. And I'll close it, and we'll open it all over again. Okay, so I've created Form 2 here, and all the tools are the same, except for if you look down at the bottom here, I'm tabbing through the table. So not only can I see an individual record here, but I can also see the whole table. All right. And the same is true here. If I want to add a new record, I can add a new record. All right. Again, we're looking at user interfaces here. Let me close that off. All right. So there's tables. All right. And we have, and I'll let you explore some of these. We have wizards that allow us to create tables, and we have a variety of different tools where we can actually even create a completely blank form. Okay. So let's create a table here now. All right, or excuse me, let me create a form here, and my next form I'm going to create, I'm actually going to use some of the concepts out of the next section of chapter 4 here, which deals with some controls and some calculated fields here. All right, so I created this, and right away I'm gonna save it and give it a name. Okay, so this will be my Form 3. Got lots of examples here today. All right, and I'll close it off, and we'll open it again. When I open it, it typically goes right to Form View, which is similar to Datasheet View. But I want to make some changes here, all right? So I can go in and I can go to Layout View and Design View. Let me go to Layout View here first, all right? And now I can start, if I wanted to move some controls around. By the way, this particular control here, this is known as a text box. And here it gives me a list of all my controls. And if I mouse over these, typically they give me, like this is a label. You see I get information about them. A button. I can put buttons in here. Here's a tab control. Here's drop down or combo boxes. You know, there's all sorts of things. This particular control here, if you notice that I had a drop down list, this is a drop down control. All right, and these are standard programming controls that we see for forms that are built for the desktop, but are also built for the web too. So you're starting to get into some, you know, really see the power of Microsoft Access here, because I have a whole programming language back behind this too that I can utilize. All right, let me look at some other characteristics here. So I can create new controls if I want it, and these controls can be bound or unbound. My controls right here. So for instance, this particular control, let's go to phone here, is a bound form, which means it's bound to a field in a table. All right, so I can go over here and I go to I have this property sheet. Now this is where it really, I won't say it gets confusing, but it just shows you the power here on my property sheet. I have all these, and I'll just click on my all. I have all these different attributes that I can assign to this one little control here. I can't tell you, what do we got, 50 attributes there? So if I go back over to, you know, data, we can find that when I talked about this being a unbound control, well this one isn't. This is a bound control, and my control source is coming from, and I'm going to expand this so we can see, it's coming from a table that I have here. Let's see if I can find that. But my data source is coming from the phone field in the employees table. Okay. And I have, you see I have an input mask on here. This allows me to, again, further refine my data. And this one has, you know, kind of the long distance or a complete phone number format where I have parentheses around a zip code, pound, 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 and then a hyphen, and pound, 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 pound. Okay, and that's showing me, that gives me this nice format you see here. All right, let me change some properties in one of our fields. And what I'm going to do here, I have my ID field, and I don't edit this because it's an auto number. So what I'm going to do with this particular one, I'll go over here to all, and there is one of the controls that I'll find kind of down towards the bottom is right now this is enabled, and I'm going to change that control so that it is no longer enabled, and I'll show you the impact of that, and maybe you see it right away that it grays it out. And then when I go back to my form view, if you notice now, that's grayed out. So in other words, I can't make changes to that. And that's appropriate for the auto number because we don't typically make changes to it. Do you see how I get skipped to when I go through, when I tab through that? I can't go to that. In fact, if I go to the next one, it skips down too. So that no longer is, that particular control is no longer enabled. Okay? So you're going to get in this course, you're going to get my 30-minute lecture here and demonstration, and you're going to read out of the textbook here. But there's an enormous amount of further material that you could, if this is of interest to you, that you could study out of Microsoft Access. Okay, and I'm really not going to be able to do justice on all this, but I will kind of give you this little bit of an overview. All right. So let me. So we got the property sheet here, and again, I can access that. Here's the button for it up here on the top. All right, I can add additional fields here. I can grab other controls, and let me grab another text box. I'm just going to grab it, and I'm going to just drop it down on my form. All right, and so I don't have a, let me give it a, do you see how I could start manipulating this here? First, it comes in as text 26. Maybe I want to change the name of that, so the name is, the caption's no longer text 26. I can give it a different name. Okay, so label for this particular control, rather than date of hire, I'm going to use a calculated field here, which we talk about later in this particular chapter. And I'm going to follow, if you do open up your textbook here to page 869, what we'll take a look at is we'll add this calculated control. And so instead of looking at hire date here, what I want to look at is years of service. So I will go ahead and change this to years of service. Okay, and I can do that either by using a property sheet. Okay, or I can just go right in here and start editing. So I can delete this and say years of service. Okay, now we'll change it. All right. Now you can see I have some issues here with things not being wide enough. So I'll kind of select this and I'll widen this out a little bit. Okay, so we can view that. All right, and then over here I got my years of service, but I don't, I need to find a way to link that to, and we'll use a little data arithmetic here. And so I'm going to go in here, and I'm in this text box here, and I'm going to go to my data tab, and where it says control source here, I'm going to click on these three dots here, and you're going to recognize this because I'm back into my expression builder. And I'm going to use the formula that's listed on page 869. So what I want to do with this now is I want to take the current date, subtract from that the higher date, and that will give me the number of days that person's been working for me, and then I'll divide it by 365. Okay, so let's create this calculated control. So first thing I gotta do is go find a function. I'm looking for built-in functions, and I'll find some date functions here. I want to find the current date. Okay, so there it is, date. So I'll put date in there. Minus, okay, my higher date, which is going to be found up here in the field just above this. So I'll go into my form, and this particular one here is called, let's find it, date of hire. And I'm just going to click OK, and let's see what we get for, actually I'm going to build this a little differently here. Let's build it kind of one step at a time. So if I put the date function in and I click OK, it gives me the current date. All right, now let's go up here and edit this some more. So take the date function, I'll put some parentheses in it, and I'm going to subtract from it. I'm in my form, and I'll subtract 1/5/2001, which is found over here in that particular text box. Is called date of hire. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK and save it here. Okay, so that, and that seems pretty close. It's 2000, we're subtracting today's date, which is 2011, from this date, which is 2001. That's going to be about, 30, it's going to be 365 times 10, so we're looking at about 3,600 at least days there, and so we come up with 3765, so that seems reasonable. Let me finish this now. So I'm following my formula, and then I want to divide this by 365. Okay, so I click OK. And I have a calculated date now. So for this particular person, Davy Jones has worked for me for about 10 years. All right, and let me come back now, and I'll go back to my view here. And I'm going to just space through these, and I'm going to highlight somewhere else. All right, so Mick Jagger's worked for me since 1998. That's 13 years plus. Here's Elton John, who's worked for me for almost 12 years. And David Lee Roth, 6 years. And John Bon Jovi, we just hired, so he's got 0 years of service. So that seems to work. And I want to go back, we mentioned again, let's kind of close the loop here. So I'll save my form 3. And I can go back here, and do you see I haven't changed anything in my form because it's calculating based upon the current date and then my date of hire. Okay, so I'll close that. One last note here. I can also change the way this is displayed by manipulating those properties over there too. If I don't want to say 10.315, we can do something about that. I can round that, truncate it, however I want to put that together. Okay, so that's forms, and that's really in a nutshell. And again, I'll get back to the fact that you're going to have some MyIT Lab exercises that'll take you through some of this, but it's really important for you guys to read this and really have a complete understanding of what forms are.